Here's a bit of a starter on reloading. So you've got your firearm, you've been doing a bit of shooting, and you've found out you're quite a bit more interested in it than you thought you might be. So you've been thinking about giving reloading a go. For whatever reason, you might think you're saving money, you'd like to tailor a load for your particular rifle, or you just like doing new things and learning all about your hobby, or it might be a combination of those things. First of all, you're playing around with gunpowder primers, which are explosive, can hurt you, can damage your property or destroy your property. So you need to keep that in mind. And keep flames and stuff, ignition sources away from your powder. Don't get your primers too hot. And it often pays to wear maybe some safety glasses when you're doing this. Now, it's not a very hard thing to do. It's just a bit of a process you've got to learn. And as you move along, you'll become more confident with it. Some cases can be reloaded and some can't. Here's an example of one that can't be. This is 22 Magnum. It's a rimfire cartridge. You can see on the rim of it that the round is set off as there's some priming mixture when they manufacture the case in the rim part here of it. I think they put it into the case and then they spin the case and then they make the rim. The firing pin hits the rim and sets the gunpowder charge off. You can't replace the primer on it, so that's an example of a case that you can't reload. This one here is what they call a centerfire case. Primer part is in the middle on this, not around the rim. And that primer can be taken out of the brass case and a new one can be put in. And then you can refill it with powder and put your projectile in. This is just going to be a basic video. I won't go in too much into the technical stuff. This is just to get you started if you've been thinking about it. So that's the difference with those two. Depending on your budget, there's a couple of ways you can go about it. Most commonly, people will go and buy a reloading press. Here's an example of what a reloading press basically looks like. They'll do the same thing pretty much. This is quite an old one, an RCBS. This one's mounted on a solid piece of wood. So if I want to, we can take it with us and we G-clamp it to a solid bench to work on. It's quite an old one. And that you need this, plus you'll need dies to suit your cartridge that you're going to reload. There's all different cartridges, there's all different dies to suit the different cartridges. So what I've been using now are these dies here. These are collet dies. They only size the neck and they don't seem to work the brass too much because they just squeeze it back down. They don't kind of force it through the die and work the brass too much. So this die screws into the press up here. You screw it in. There's a procedure to setting the die up that comes with the dies if you're buying them usually new, or you'll be able to find something online on how to set the die up. You don't just screw it in and away you go. And the other piece that you will need is a shell holder. can't get it out. But that shell holder, your shell slips into it, and it goes into the press here. So that holds your case, so you can pull it back down out of your die when you're doing your reloading process. There's two main dies you'll probably be using. The one I just showed you, this is what they call a collet die. So this one sizes the neck, which is this part here on the case, and it also knocks the primer out with this pointy bit that sticks out the bottom of it. That knocks the primer out. There's a little tiny hole in the center, but it's not a military round, and I'm not sure if the modern stuff does it, but the civilian type ammunition, it just has one little hole in behind this primer, and that pin goes into the hole, knocks the primer out. One thing I do with my dies is they come with this type of locking ring to lock it in the press. It works, but you've got to really be careful with it, because that nut doesn't lock up very positively on the die, so it can change from time to time. What I do is I buy one of these die locking rings. So you set your die up, you tighten that little Allen screw in there, and this actually locks the nut to the die so it won't move, so it'll always stay the same. The only time you'll need to recheck it possibly is if you use it in a different press. It would pay to check it. The other die you'll be using is the seating die. This is the die that puts the projectile into the case and seats it to a certain depth. You can adjust them. There's all kinds of different ways you can measure your seating depth, and the seating depth is how far the projectile sticks out of the case when you're loading it. Playing with the length of the projectile can alter your accuracy. It's one thing with the reloading, you get to play around with all that kind of stuff, and that's what makes it so fun. The other way you can go is, and how I started, is with a set like this. This is a die, basically it's a reloading set, and you don't need a press. You actually do it with a hammer. Okay, I still use these kind of sets. If you can get one in your caliber, and you're reloading hunting ammunition, there's nothing wrong with it. I've actually done a side-by-side test with this set and using a set in the press. I've loaded identical ammunition, identical projectiles, powder weight, primers, and as far as from a hunting point of view, there was no difference in the accuracy of the ammo. This kind of might take a little bit longer once you get the hang of it, but you can actually get a few rounds out once you get into the process and used to it. So I use a soft hammer with it. This is a dead blow hammer, and I also use a solid block of wood to sit it on when I'm working on it. This kind of set here, it would probably pay to wear eye protection for sure, especially with the priming stage. It's supposed to be very safe, but it's kind of pays to be a bit wary when you're hitting around the primer area with hammers. So with this type of set, okay, sorry about that, the phone fell over. So with this kind of set, this part here is the die. Now I can't get this one apart because it's been sitting for a little while. This part will come out. There's a rod that goes down in here on the side of it. This is the priming part of the die. So what you'll do is, there's a couple of ways you do it. How I do it is, this is the depriming rod. You see there's that pin on it that you can see on the die. So you'll sit your case on the decapping part of it. The case will go in there. This will go down inside it. If you feel it, you'll be able to feel it just start to go into the hole. You'll hit it, it'll knock the primer out. And then you can put it into here. It goes in this end here on it. Put it in there, you hit it up till it's flush with the end, and that just this type of die will just neck size the case as well. Then once you've hit it up there, this comes out. You'll knock it back out with this rod. Sit the primer on here, up the right way, and then you put the case back in the die, sit it on here, use this rod. This one doesn't have the point on it. That one will go inside the case. You hit it and it'll prime it. It'll knock the primer into the case. This has got a little washer that moves. It'll only move so far, so you don't squash the primer. Then you'll sit it back on this. Sit it back on this with your primer in it. Put your powder in. This will sit over the case. Drop your primer in the top, and then this. Put this back in. It's got an end on it. It's shaped a bit like this. And then you'll seat the projectile. How you adjust this one is here. There's a little lock nut here. You loosen that off. You can wind the die in and out, so that will adjust your seating length. That's just a brief going over, and just a couple of things you can look at if you're thinking of getting into reloading. The other thing you're going to need is a way to measure your powder. You probably saw those die sets have scoops in them. I would not recommend using a scoop and relying on it. I would buy some scales, because you really need to make sure how much powder you're weighing in, and you're playing with explosives and you don't want to blow yourself or your gun up. You can start off with a basic, this is like the entry-level scale here. It's a Lee scale. It's pretty basic. It'll do the job. It takes a bit because it doesn't have very good dampening in it, and so it takes a while to settle when you're weighing your charge out. What I use is a digital scale. There are really flash ones out there. This is just quite a basic one. We're talking entry level reloading, just getting into it. This is what I've always used. They seem quite accurate. I've made accurate ammunition with them. They're just, the only painful thing with them is the auto turn off on them when you're sometimes halfway through trickling out a load and the thing turns off. But other than that, they've been quite good. I'm still using them, so yeah, there's two options with your entry-level scales. The other thing you're going to need if you decide to go with the press is a way of putting the primers into the cases. I use a ram prime, a Lee ram primer. It's made up of 2 pieces. This part here holds the primer. It goes in here. It slots into the ram. It goes up and down with the ram. There's 2 sizes because centerfire cases have 2 size primers. If you're talking rifles, there's a large rifle primer and small rifle primer. You'll need to find out what goes in your particular case before you buy them. The other piece is this piece. This screws into the top of the press, and your shell holder goes in there. So what you do, you put your primer in here, slot your case into your shell holder that you've screwed into the press, and you raise it, and it puts the primer into the case. It's quite easy. Not really much to go wrong with it, and that's what I've always used. It seems to work for me. About the only other useful thing that you're going to need to get yourself started is what they call a loading block. The loading block is what you're going to hold your ammunition in while you're assembling it. They can be simple, like this, which is just a piece of wood with holes drilled in it to suit your particular size case. That one there will fit these. They just sit in there. And a funnel would be, you need a funnel as well. I haven't got that here, but so you primed it. What I do, they're deprimed. Once I deprime them, I set them upside down in the block. Then you can tell they've got no primers in them, because the last thing you want to do is go putting powder in your cases with no primers. It wastes a bit of powder. So once I put the primer in, I put them this way into the block. Then I know they're primed. Then I measure my charge out, gunpowder, with my scales, and put it into the case via a funnel. You can either do them one at a time, you can do the whole block. Just be very careful you don't do the same case twice. Put twice the amount of powder in it. That won't end well. And then you go and put your projectiles in, and you've got yourself some homemade ammunition that you made yourself. The other block is one of these. These are quite good too. It holds certain size cases on this side, and it's reversible. And there's two different sizes here for different size cases. This is what I find I use now. With this one, you usually have to have a couple of different blocks with the different holes in them. This is all in one, so it just keeps it all together. Okay, thank you.